Late evening. The office was empty, and only the keys of the keyboard dully clicked in the silence. Anya always stayed late, trying to finish work before the deadline. The light of the desk lamp snatched only her desk from the darkness. The rest of the offices were plunged into darkness. Suddenly, the phone on her desk rang. She was surprised. No one should be calling at such a time. An unfamiliar number appeared on the screen. A second of doubt, and she finally decided to answer. "Hello?" Silence was the answer. Anya pressed the volume up button on her phone, but nothing changed. She was about to hang up when she suddenly heard a whisper. "You're not alone there." Her heart skipped a beat. She looked around sharply. The offices were still empty, and it seemed like there was no one else in the office. This is just someone's evil joke, Anya thought, turning off her phone and wiping sweat from her forehead. But as soon as she returned to work, the phone rang again. A week passed after that strange call. Anya tried to forget about it, convincing herself that it was someone's inappropriate prank. But one evening, leaving the office, she noticed something strange. Wet footprints of bare feet were visible on the floor in the hallway. At first, she thought that the cleaners had simply not wiped the floor properly, but the footprints led straight to her desk and ended there. Her heart sank. Anya approached cautiously, looking around. The tracks were clearly fresh, but there shouldn't have been anyone in the office. The security had already left, and her colleagues usually didn't stay until late in the evening. She remembered the strange whisper on the phone. "You're not alone there." She clutched her mobile phone in her trembling hands and dialed the security guard's number. "Oleg, have you seen anyone in the office?" Her voice trembled. "No, the cameras don't show anything. Everything is clear," the guard answered calmly. Oleg's words calmed her down a little, but they didn't dispel the strange feeling that someone was watching her. All evening, she couldn't shake the feeling that an invisible gaze was following her. Anya decided to leave the office early, but as she was leaving, she caught a glimpse of something in the reflection of the glass door, as if a shadow had flashed behind her. Frozen in place, she looked around again. No one. But the feeling of a stranger's presence did not leave her. Anya couldn't sleep all night. The memory of those strange footprints and the shadow she saw in the glass door kept spinning in her head. Just stress, she convinced herself. In the morning, when she came to the office, the first thing she did was inspect the room. The floor was clean, no footprints. Everything looked normal, as if nothing had happened. But as the evening wore on, her restlessness began to return. She had stayed late again that day, trying to finish a project. In the quiet of the office, every sound seemed louder than usual. The whir of the air conditioner, the creak of her chair, the tap of her own fingers on the keyboard. But soon, something new joined the noise, a faint footstep behind her. Anya froze. The footsteps were barely audible, as if someone was trying not to attract attention. She took a deep breath, trying to calm down, and slowly turned around. Nobody! Her heart was pounding. "I'm imagining this," she thought, returning to her work. But as soon as she sat down at her desk again, the footsteps resumed, closer this time. Anya jumped up, her hands shaking. She grabbed her mobile phone and looked around, trying to find the source of the sounds, but the room was empty. And then in the glass doors of the office, she saw a reflection again, this time clearly, the figure of a man standing behind her. Anya turned around abruptly. There was still no one in the room. She took a sharp breath, ran out of the office in a panic, and did not return that evening. When she got home, she could not shake the thought that something or someone had been in the office with her. For several days, Anya tried not to stay late at the office. She felt that she should leave all the strangeness behind, but thoughts about what had happened did not leave her. Every time she passed by the glass doors or was left alone, a feeling of inexplicable fear washed over her again in a wave. She caught herself involuntarily looking over her shoulder, expecting to see that very shadow. But one day she had to stay late again. The project was on the verge of failure, and Anya understood that she had no choice. Already in the evening, when there was no one left in the office again, she sat down to work. The hours dragged on slowly, and the silence around became stifling. Several hours passed when the phone on her desk rang again, the same unfamiliar number. She froze, hesitating to pick it up, but after a few rings, she finally answered. Hello? Her voice trembled. In response, there was a whisper, much louder than the first time. You won't leave. Anya threw down the phone with a scream and jumped up. At that moment, the light in the office began to flicker, as if someone was playing with the switch. In a panic, she moved towards the exit, but the doors did not open, as if someone was holding them from the other side. Suddenly, quiet voices were heard throughout the room, as if from afar. They were whispering something unintelligible, getting closer and closer. She felt a cold wind touch her skin, although the windows were closed. The sound of footsteps in the darkness grew closer, and the shadow in the corner of the room appeared again. This time it moved slowly towards Anya. Fear paralyzed her. Her legs refused to move, and her heart pounded wildly. The voices grew louder, as if someone was surrounding her. Suddenly, the light went out completely, and Anya found herself in complete darkness. She was overcome with panic and screamed. At that moment, someone's cold fingers touched her shoulder. Anya screamed, trying to break free from the invisible grip. Her whole life flashed before her eyes in a few seconds. She lunged for the door, tugging furiously at the handle, but it still wouldn't budge. The cold fingers on her shoulder tightened, as if someone was trying to hold her back. Suddenly, the office lights flickered, and she saw a face in front of her. Ghostly, pale, with empty black eyes. Anya threw herself on the floor, trying to crawl away, but the figure leaned towards her, and its whisper pierced the silence. You should have known. Suddenly, the office door opened by itself with a loud click, and Anya, gathering her last strength, ran out into the street. She ran into the car and, without looking back, rushed home, breathing heavily and not believing that she had escaped. The next day, she decided that she could no longer ignore what was happening. Her mind was tormented by one question: why is this happening to me? She decided to return to the office, not to work, but to search for answers. In the archived documents, she began to look for any information related to this building. Strange calls, footsteps, a shadow, everything indicated that something terrible had happened in this place. Leafing through old articles and archived reports, Anya came across a story that made her freeze. Several years ago, a mysterious murder had occurred in this building. A young woman was found dead in the office where Anya now worked. The woman's name was Anna Zalewskaya. Her name matched Anya's. Further investigation revealed another grisly detail. Anna Zalewskaya not only worked in the same office, but also occupied the same place as Anya. The worst part was that she died under strange circumstances, murdered, but the killer was never found. The only suspect was her colleague with whom she had a conflict, but the case was closed due to lack of evidence. Anya began to understand. The ghost of that woman had returned, thirsting for justice. Perhaps she was connected to this place, and her spirit was restless. Anya felt that she had not been chosen by chance. She was a link between the past and the present. That night, Anya heard the bell ring again, but this time she didn't answer. She knew the only way to end this nightmare was to find the truth and maybe help the ghost find peace. Anya could no longer ignore what was happening. The understanding that her life was connected to the tragic death of Anna Zalewska did not give her peace. She decided to sort this out at any cost, because only the truth could put an end to the terrible events. Taking all the documents she had found and contacting former employees of the company, Anya began to reconstruct the details of that tragedy. It turned out that Anna Zalewskaya had not simply died under strange circumstances. There really was a dark story behind her. She learned that an influential person was involved in her death, the same colleague who was then considered innocent. He manipulated people, falsified evidence, and escaped punishment. Anya realized that Anna's ghost was not seeking revenge. It wanted the truth to finally come out. The real killer had to be exposed. Anya went to the police with new evidence, but it was not enough to investigate. She decided to take the step she feared most of all, to return to the office where this whole terrible story began. On her last evening, she walked into the dark office, feeling the air around her thicken. It was as if shadows were watching her every move. She sat down at her desk, turned on her computer, and wrote an open letter detailing the truth about Anna Zalewska's death, accusing her former colleague of murder. She sent the letter to the police, the press, and her colleagues, then sat down to wait. The silence around was becoming unbearable, and soon the phone rang again. Anya, trembling, picked up the receiver, expecting to hear a familiar whisper. But this time everything was different. A soft, calm voice came through the receiver. "Thank you." The shadow in the corner slowly melted away, as if it had disappeared forever, leaving behind only a slight rustling sound. The light in the office no longer flickered, and the air seemed surprisingly calm and clean. Anya felt a huge weight lifted from her shoulders. She had managed to do what no one else could, give Anna's ghost peace and justice. The next day, her letter became a sensation. The police reopened the investigation, and Anna Zalewska's killer was finally arrested, exposed, and convicted. The office, which had long been a place of fear and mystery, returned to normal. Anya no longer heard strange calls, saw no traces or shadows. The ghost of the past was gone forever, leaving her alone. But she knew that this story would always remain in her memory, a reminder that the truth cannot be hidden, and that sometimes its discovery requires courage to face the most terrible fears.